At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, an HOA Karen made a $3 million mistake that would land her in federal prison for 8 years. And it all started with a pair of bolt cutters in the wrong military vehicle. Clang! The sound of those bolt cutters biting through my security chain echoed through perfect suburban silence like gunshots. That metallic snap was the moment Bethany Kensington Wright went from HOA president to federal felon in 30 seconds. See, while I was deployed overseas fighting drug cartels, this power-hungry suburban dictator decided my eyesore vehicle needed to disappear. What she didn't know was that the Jeep she tried to tow belonged to a federal drug task force. It was loaded with $347,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment, and I'm the kind of federal agent who specializes in taking down criminal organizations. She thought she was dealing with a helpless soldier's truck. She actually committed federal crimes that would make cartel bosses jealous. My name is Marcus Tank Rodriguez, and 3 months ago, I thought inheriting my grandmother's house would be a blessing. Boy, was I wrong. Willowbrook Estates looked like a perfect slice of suburban paradise. Identical beige houses, manicured lawns, and mailboxes lined up like obedient soldiers. But behind that neat perfection hid a stench of control, the kind that seeps through community newsletters and passive-aggressive meeting notes. HOA dues, $150 a month for community standards. Translation: paying someone like Bethany to make your life miserable. I'm Army Reserve MP, recently accepted into a federal drug task force. Grandma Rose's house was supposed to be my safety net. Rent it out during deployments, build equity, and honor the woman who raised me after my parents died in a car crash when I was 12. That house still smells like her homemade tortillas and her favorite vanilla candles. Every creaky floorboard holds memories of her teaching me right from wrong. "Me-ho," she'd say, "you stand up to bullies, but you do it the right way." Quote, then came Bethany Kensington Wright, 52 years old, real estate agent, and self-declared queen of the cul-de-sac. She drove a white Lexus SUV, wore pearls to mow her lawn, and actually measured grass height with a ruler. 7 years as HOA president had turned her into a suburban dictator. Her husband Carl sat on city council, which made her feel untouchable. This woman sent violation notices for Christmas lights still hanging in January and once fined a neighbor for having a faded mailbox flag. 2 weeks into my deployment, I got an email. Violation notice, unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. My government-issued Jeep Wrangler, marked with federal decals, was apparently a no-quote eyesore. Bethany's interpretation of HOA covenants, no work vehicles in residential driveways. Here's what she didn't know: that Jeep contained $200,000 worth of surveillance equipment for active cartel investigations. GPS trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras, all federal property. You move that vehicle without authorization, and you've just committed a federal offense. The fine? $50 a day. Accumulating while I was dodging bullets overseas. My sister Maya, a middle school teacher with a heart too kind for her own good, tried reasoning with this suburban tyrant. She drove over, showed copies of my deployment orders, and even offered to cover the Jeep with a tarp. "Rules are rules," Bethany snapped, looking down her nose at Maya. "If your brother can't follow community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for your family." That phone call from Maya still echoes in my head, her voice cracking as she sat in Grandma's kitchen. "Tank," she threatened to put a lien on the house. Said Carl knows people at the school district, and if I make trouble, it could affect my job. That's when Maya started digging. She found out that Johnson's, he's a Marine, got cited for excessive motorcycle noise. Sarah Martinez, Navy wife, fined for unprofessional garden decor. Every military family in Willowbrook was getting targeted. But the violations? They weren't real. Maya found the original HOA bylaws buried in Grandma's old files, signed in 1987. Government, military, and emergency vehicles were explicitly exempt from restrictions. Bethany had been fabricating rules, counting on people being too intimidated to check. Neighbors whispered over fences but stayed silent in meetings. Bethany's power came from fear. fear of fines, liens, and social isolation. She wielded her husband's city council influence like a sword. People gave in, thinking resistance was futile. But I'd faced cartels, ambushes, and corruption overseas. I knew what I was dealing with: organized harassment under the guise of community standards. And this time the enemy wore pearls and carried a clipboard. The day Maya called, I was halfway around the world, crouched behind a Humvee under the searing desert sun. The smell of diesel and sweat clung to my uniform as I listened to her shaking voice. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling Grandma's block. The driver keeps looking at your Jeep." The texture of sand between my teeth, the heat stinging my eyes. I could almost hear Grandma's voice again. "Stand up to bullies, mijo. But do it the right way." So I did. I called JAG, military legal. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams listened as I explained everything. When I told her Bethany Kensington Wright was trying to tow a federal task force vehicle, her tone shifted instantly. "Rodriguez, that's not an HOA violation. That's theft of federal property. We're opening a case." That was the first domino. The Service Members Civil Relief Act protects deployed military personnel from exactly this kind of harassment. Add to that, my Jeep wasn't just mine. It belonged to the United States government. Tampering with it triggered laws far above Bethany's pay grade. But the real twist came when Maya found something buried in old meeting minutes. A 2019 letter from Bethany to the City Planning Commission opposing military housing programs. Her reason? Transient populations reduce long-term community stability. Translation: she'd been trying to keep military families out of Willowbrook for years. The aged paper crumbled between Maya's fingers as she whispered through the phone. "Tank, she's been targeting every military family here. This isn't random. It's planned." That's when it stopped being about fines. It became personal. Bethany wasn't just enforcing rules. She was orchestrating a campaign against military families, backed by her husband's political clout. She didn't just pick the wrong soldier. She picked the wrong federal agent. Because while she was busy measuring lawns, I was trained to dismantle criminal organizations, and her little suburban empire was about to become my next takedown. Bethany's next move came 48 hours later, and it was pure suburban warfare. A registered letter hit Maya's mailbox, demanding immediate vehicle removal or emergency towing within 24 hours. Not 48, not 72, 24 hours. This woman was trying to steal federal property while I was serving overseas. The letter was even carbon copied to Carl's city council office and the local police department. It sounded official, but it was complete fiction wrapped in legal-sounding nonsense designed to intimidate. Maya called me from Grandma's kitchen. I could hear the panic in her voice mixing with the creak of those old wooden floorboards. "Tank, there's a tow truck circling again. The driver keeps staring at your Jeep like he's measuring something." The smell of Grandma's vanilla candles couldn't hide the sharp edge of fear in Maya's tone. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was psychological warfare, suburban style. I dealt with terrorists who used fear to control people, and now I was watching it happen in my own hometown, led by a woman in a floral blouse with a clipboard. I unleashed my first counterpunch. I contacted JAG, Judge Advocate General. Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams, a sharp, no-nonsense military lawyer, took one look at my case file, and her tone turned from polite to deadly serious. "Rodriguez, she just threatened to steal federal law enforcement property. That's a felony. We're escalating." Williams explained that the Service Members Civil Relief Act didn't just protect me from financial exploitation, it made it a federal offense to interfere with property belonging to deployed personnel. And my Jeep wasn't just mine, it was federal government equipment. That meant tampering with it triggered the Department of Defense, Homeland Security, and federal jurisdiction. Within hours, my report was filed through official channels, flagged for review by a military liaison office. That one move pulled Bethany's name into a federal database she didn't even know existed. But things got worse back home. Maya, determined to expose Bethany's abuse, started digging deeper through Grandma's old HOA paperwork. Buried in those yellowing pages She found another bombshell, emails from 2019 showing Bethany lobbying the city to block veteran housing projects. The words were polite on the surface but venomous underneath. Military families create instability and lower community appeal. When Maya called me and read those words aloud, something inside me turned cold. "Tank," she said softly. "She's been doing this for years. She's been trying to drive out anyone connected to the military." Quote. I could practically taste the grit in my mouth as I crouched in the desert, headset pressed tight against my ear. "She picked the wrong family," I muttered. The next day, Maya saw Bethany again. The woman strutted down the sidewalk in her pink blazer, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. She stopped in front of Grandma's house, adjusted her oversized sunglasses, and started snapping photos of my Jeep. Click, click, click. The sound of entitlement in action. Maya stepped outside, clutching her phone. "Mrs. Wright, my brother's deployed. You've seen his orders. You can't do this." Bethany didn't even look up. "Your brother's military service doesn't exempt him from community standards. If he can't comply, he can sell the house." That was her mistake, saying those words while standing on camera, because my Jeep had more than just surveillance equipment. It had motion sensors, infrared triggers, and automatic recording features tied directly to federal systems. Every time she stepped within 15 feet of that vehicle, it snapped photos and logged GPS data. By the end of that day, we had 17 instances of her trespassing on federal property. That wasn't an HOA violation. That was federal espionage. When I sent the data to Captain Sarah Chen, my task force supervisor, she didn't even pause. "Rodriguez," she said, her voice calm but dangerous, "how fast do you want this woman's life to get complicated?" The first consequence came quietly. Federal investigators contacted the HOA's insurance company, alerting them that their president was under investigation for harassment of a deployed soldier and possible theft of federal property. Policies froze overnight. No one in Willowbrook could file a claim without legal review. Bethany's neighbors were furious and scared. That's when she doubled down. 3 days later, she hired ExecSafe Security, 2 guards in a white SUV with community patrol printed on the sides. They started driving past Grandma's house every hour, shining flashlights at the Jeep and jotting notes. But the real issue wasn't the patrols, it was what they were telling the neighbors. Maya called me, her voice shaking. "Tank, they're saying you're dangerous, that your vehicle's full of surveillance gear that could spy on families. People are scared." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about harassment anymore. It was defamation, and worse, painting a veteran as a threat to his own community. I tried to focus during my next operation briefing overseas, but all I could hear was Maya's voice. She was crying now. "Even the kids at my school are whispering about me. Parents are saying my brother's dangerous. The principal wants a meeting." That was when the rage settled into something sharp and focused. I wasn't just going to defend my property. I was going to dismantle their entire corrupt system. So I went back to the one weapon Bethany couldn't fight: the truth. During my next communication window, I accessed my Jeep's surveillance archives remotely. The footage made my stomach twist. There she was, Bethany, at 1:43 in the morning, shining a flashlight into the Jeep's windows, trying to peek at the dashboard. Behind her stood 2 security guards, taking pictures of the radio, the mounted cameras, and the encryption console. She was photographing classified law enforcement equipment. When I sent the footage to Captain Chen, her reply came in one cold, perfect sentence: "Rodriguez, your HOA president just committed espionage." Bethany had crossed the final line, and she didn't even know it. The moment she touched that Jeep, she triggered federal systems designed to track tampering and alert Homeland Security. I could almost hear Grandma's voice again. "Stand up to bullies, mijo, but do it the right way." The right way was already in motion. That's when the community began to fracture. People who'd feared Bethany started whispering about what she'd done. Veterans who'd been silent began comparing stories. Fines, threats, intimidation, all the same pattern. My sister had become the lightning rod, The one who'd finally made people realize they weren't powerless. And Bethany? She was too arrogant to see the storm coming. At 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, she picked up those bolt cutters. That sound, the metallic snap, wasn't just her cutting a chain. It was her cutting her own future in half. The sound of those bolt cutters still echoes in my head. Clang, clang, clang. Each metallic snap slicing through the morning silence, like gunfire across the cul-de-sac. Bethany Kensington Wright was in her bathrobe, hair disheveled, standing on my grandmother's driveway with a tow truck idling beside her. Maya's phone camera caught every second of it. "Tank! She's cutting your lock! She's cutting it right now!" Maya screamed through the phone, her voice trembling with disbelief. Through the live video feed, I watched the Suburban dictator who'd tormented military families for years commit multiple federal felonies in real time. The tow truck driver hesitated when he saw the federal decals on my Jeep. "Ma'am, this looks like government property." "I'm not touching that," he said, stepping back. Bethany's face flushed red. "It's abandoned property," she shouted, spittle flying. "I'm the HOA president. I have legal authority to remove violations." Quote. That sentence, captured on 3 security cameras, became Exhibit A in a federal theft case. The moment she cut that lock, my Jeep's internal sensors went live. GPS trackers, microphones, security cameras, all feeding directly to the Homeland Security database. The system flagged the incident as a breach of classified law enforcement property. Within minutes, a federal alert pinged across 3 states. By the time Maya's video hit the cloud, federal marshals were already en route. Bethany thought she'd won. She stood there like a queen conquering a driveway, waving the new gate keys she'd installed after locking out emergency access. "If he wants his truck back, he can follow proper HOA procedure," she sneered. "Military service doesn't make anyone above community rules." Her arrogance would cost her everything. Word spread through the neighborhood fast. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly widow who'd lost both sons in the Gulf War, saw the whole thing from her window. She called every veteran in Willowbrook, every neighbor who'd ever been harassed. By 10 a.m., the cul-de-sac was packed. Dozens of neighbors, veterans, families, teachers, even kids, stood shoulder to shoulder in front of Grandma's house. American flags waved in the morning light. The air smelled like fresh coffee and defiance. Tom Henderson, a Vietnam vet with shaky hands and fire in his eyes, stood on the curb shouting, "You'll have to go through 30 of us before you touch that vehicle again!" Maya's voice cracked as she called me back, this time filled with hope. "Tank, you won't believe it. The whole neighborhood showed up. They're standing guard." Bethany, blinded by arrogance, took it as an act of rebellion. She called the police, the fire department, code enforcement, even animal control, claiming, quote, armed veterans were forming a militia. Each false report stacked new charges, filing fraudulent complaints, obstruction of justice, and false statements about federal property. Then the federal marshals arrived. Their black SUVs rolled up to the locked community gate, lights flashing against perfect beige houses. Marshal Jennifer Torres stepped out first. Tall, calm, radiating authority that could freeze a riot. She approached Bethany with an expression that could cut steel. "Ma'am, you've obstructed federal agents investigating theft of government property. Open this gate immediately." Bethany folded her arms, voice dripping venom. "I don't recognize federal authority over private HOA property." That was it. Game over. Within seconds, the marshals cut through the new locks with their own bolt cutters, ironic justice, and stormed the neighborhood. Cameras from local news stations captured the moment as Bethany screamed, "You can't do this!" They did. 3 days later, I was back on U.S. soil. When I walked into Grandma's kitchen, the familiar smell of vanilla candles mixed with something heavier, relief. Maya sat surrounded by documents spread across the old dining table. "Tank," she said, her voice low but steady. "I found something. You need to see this." Quote. The manila folders contained 5 years of HOA financial records, embezzled funds, fake invoices, illegal transfers to Carl's development company. Over $180,000 siphoned from residents, dues for community improvements that never happened. But buried deeper was a contract that made my blood run cold. A real estate deal between Carl's company and a luxury developer. They'd been planning to force out every military and elderly family to sell properties cheap. Grandma's house, our home, was on the acquisition list. Maya's hands shook as she turned the page. Tank! They were clearing the neighborhood, using violations, harassment, and intimidation to make people leave. I stared at the papers, the smell of dust and betrayal filling the air. They picked the wrong neighborhood, I said quietly. From that moment, our kitchen became a war room. Maya, armed with spreadsheets and evidence. Captain Chen coordinating with federal prosecutors. And me, gathering every neighbor Bethany had ever bullied. Veterans, teachers, retirees, they all came. The same people who'd once lived in fear now sat shoulder to shoulder, planning justice. Within weeks, the HOA board was suspended. The FBI and federal prosecutors took over the case, calling it, quote, "Situated once suburban crime." The charges piled up: federal property theft, mail fraud, civil rights violations, embezzlement, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice. And then came the public reckoning. The Willowbrook Community Center was packed, news cameras flashing, reporters whispering. Veterans stood in the aisles, flags folded under their arms. Maya took the podium first, her voice strong, her words clear. For years, this HOA targeted military families. They lied, they intimidated, and they stole. Today, we take our neighborhood back. Applause erupted, echoing off the walls. Then I stepped forward, heart pounding, remembering Grandma's words. Bethany Kensington Wright thought she was cutting a lock on a Jeep, I said. But what she really did was cut her own future. She didn't steal from me. She stole from the United States government. Quote, gasps filled the room as federal agents stepped forward. Marshal Torres read the charges, voice calm and final. Bethany Kensington Wright, you are under arrest for theft of federal property, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut was the most satisfying click I'd ever heard. Carl tried to slip out the back door, but was met by 2 FBI agents waiting by his Lexus. His face went pale as they read his own charges: bribery, mail fraud, and public corruption. When it was over, Maya stood beside me on the steps outside the community center. The sun was setting, painting the sky gold. Grandma would have been proud, she whispered. 18 months later, justice came full circle. Bethany got 8 years in federal prison, no parole, plus $647,000 in restitution. Carl got 6. The development deal collapsed. And Willowbrook Estates became a national model for HOA reform. Maya was elected HOA president by unanimous vote. Her first act? The Military Family Bill of Rights, ensuring no veteran or service member could ever be harassed again. The park that replaced Bethany's seized home now bears her name, Rosa Rodriguez Memorial Park. Children play on swings where tyranny once ruled. Every year on July 4th, the community gathers there. The smell of barbecue fills the air. Kids wave flags, and veterans stand tall. And when I look at that flag flying above Grandma's old house, I remember her voice. Stand up to bullies, mijo, but do it the right way. That's exactly what we did. Justice served. Community healed. Freedom earned.